Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio.
Rifkind here on Times Radio with Elevon, full solution payment service provider for your business. Find out more at elevon.co.uk. Thank you for your many messages sent in by WhatsApp during that conversation with Robert and Anne, most of which are about WhatsApps and how very easy it is to back them up. So there we go. Maybe I'll read out some of them later. Up next, it is, of course, PMQs.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker, this is Times Radio, the voice of the times.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio, the voice of the times.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Hugo Rifkind and this is Times Radio. In a moment, PMQs, but first let's have a look at the headlines this lunchtime. Iran claims the US is negotiating with itself. Pakistan has delivered an American proposal to Iran, a senior Iranian source told Reuters, but the venue of any talks has yet to be decided. The former Minister and Conservative MP Crispin Blunt has pleaded guilty to possessing illegal drugs, including crystal meth. The prosecutor told the court that he claimed in his police interview that he used his experience of drugs at parties to inform policy development. The mother of Barnaby Webber, who was killed in the Nottingham stabbings 3 years ago, has told the inquiry she feels that family liaison officers are there to serve the police, not advocate for the family. Emma Webber said there was unfolding horror when parents learned that the culprit could plead manslaughter, not murder. And a report into foreign influence in UK politics has found that it's a persistent problem. It also says the government should temporarily stop political parties being allowed to accept cryptocurrency donations. There'll be more news in just an hour, but we'll have a full news roundup at 1 p.m. But now, live on Times Radio and the Times YouTube channels, it's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
And I'm joined, as almost always, by the Times chief political commentator, Patrick Maguire. Hello, Patrick.
Hello.
How have you been?
Very well. I'd just like to take listeners behind the curtain for a moment.
Yes.
Not my curtain.
Whose curtain?
Your curtain.
Oh, I see.
The curtain.
I didn't know I had a curtain.
The curtain of the studio. Well, there is a curtain there, isn't there? Anyway, sorry.
Let's not get bogged down in curtain chat.
Just this new hot beverage policy where you have to drink out of a flask. I've nearly burnt my mouth.
Yeah, me too.
It's so you don't pour it over anything terribly important. We're also joined by Labour peer Stuart Wood. He was senior advisor to Gordon Brown when he was Prime Minister, former advisor to Ed Miliband as well when he was Labour leader. Stuart, thanks for being with us.
Not at all. Happy birthday to me and nice to see you.
It's nice to say happy birthday to me. It's my birthday next week. So preeminent
happy birthday in advance, yeah.
Saying happy birthday to yourself, a bit like Mr. Bean.
No one else is going to do it, so I thought I'd do it for myself.
I was in the room at the Tory conference where Matt Hancock sang happy birthday to himself.
Really?
Yeah.
That's not a good sign for a career, is it?
No, it's really not. What, mine or his? I think it was downhill for both of us from there.
That's bleak. Look, before we get cracking with PMQs, before we get the first question. So, first up, Patrick, you've not been with us for the last couple of weeks. I'm sure you saw PMQs during those couple of weeks.
Yes.
Last week, I would say, was certainly the worst PMQs since I've been doing this job in a year and a half, and perhaps one of the worst I've ever seen.
Yeah, I agree. Clearly, Keir Starmer didn't want to be on the record making, I can't even remember the embarrassing admission he was trying to avoid, but it was just so odd.
It was whether Mandelson, is whether he'd talked to Mandelson.
Whether he'd spoken to Mandelson, yes.
Which is already on the record that he hadn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Number 10 had already confirmed it.
To you, in fact.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. I think, yeah.
Well, no, because it was in
it's in your book,
the new paperback edition of Get In by myself and Gabriel Pogland, and then a Downing Street spokesman confirmed it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I mean, it's more embarrassing because recall when he made the admission that he'd known about the Epstein links in PMQs, and there was a sharp intake of breath and looked like he was sinking beneath the waves in real time. I think they learned a lesson from that one.
Stuart, when a political leader has done a bad PMQs, do they get back to the office and be like, oh, that was just grisly? Or do they just go, we'll just never speak of that again? What happens?
No, you definitely have a debrief and a mood around it. I'm not sure he would have thought that was a bad PMQs, weirdly.
Yeah.
Because I think partly it's because when you have a question you don't want to answer, you get it asked repeatedly and then you keep dodging it. But actually there's something else going on in PMQs in the last few years, which is that the clip of you speaking is all that matters. So as long as you get to monologue, it doesn't matter if the speaker's furious that you're not answering the question, because you generate the clips on the subject you want to talk about. And so social media has made PMQs, I think, even more than it always has been, an exchange of two different monologues. And yesterday was just the best example of that, I think, in a long time.
So look, whatever we get this week, we are in a week in a time of looming global recession, general worldwide imminent financial meltdown. Stuart, ringing any bells?
So I just burnt my mouth again on a cup of tea in this flask. Yes, it is uncannily reminiscent of when I used to work for Gordon Brown. Except we're in that stage of sort of the first week of the crash in 2008, which we just don't know how bad it's going to be. Mm-hmm. We're in this weird pause moment at the moment, obviously.
Yeah.
Hostilities could resume. Economic crisis could spiral even more, or it could be that we're over the worst of it. We just don't know. It makes it difficult for Kemi Badenoch to know which direction to go in, partly. But it's obviously much more important for the people running the country.
As I mentioned as well, you were invited to Ed Miliband as well when he was Labour leader. There's a lot of Ed Miliband in the papers at the moment. He's getting a lot of attention. People keep basically saying he's essentially in charge of the government. There's a big piece in the New Statesman asking how he became the most powerful man in government. Michael Gove wrote this last week. Danny Finkelstein wrote it a few weeks back.
Yeah.
Is he basically running the show, Ed, do you think?
No, I don't think he's running the show. I think he's important for Keir Starmer for a number of reasons. One is that he's Energy Secretary at a time when there's a massive energy crisis. He's in a net policy area that is one of the most divisive policy areas also. Yeah. He's also someone who, even if you don't like Ed Miliband, he knows what he's doing, and he's getting stuff done in a government that's having trouble getting policy done in various areas. And he's key to the Cobra machinery that obviously is very important in the current crisis. Plus, he's very important for Keir Starmer's left flank inside the party at a time when the PRP is causing trouble. All those reasons. And he's also one of the people the media love to go back to and, rerun Bacon Sandwich and all that sort of stuff.
Do you think, Patrick, he's too big to move?
Well, they tried in September, to which Ed Miliband said, no, thank you. And Keir Starmer said, OK.
Fine then, yeah.
And it's certainly true. You don't have to take the, Ed Miliband is actually secretly running the government and giving Keir Starmer orders to, as Stuart says, right, he's Energy Secretary, and the UK's energy policy is, to a large extent, casting the image of his intellectual convictions. And as such, our response to the crisis is shaped in Ed Miliband's image to a certain extent. And it's been striking how actually every attempt by other people in the Labour Party to have this discussion, and it's cropped up at various times in Keir Starmer's time as Prime Minister. There are people in Number 10 who wanted to change it. Lots of people in Scotland have reservations about the oil and gas policy. But every time Ed Miliband has won this argument.
Yeah, indeed. Well, look, Jonathan's texted in. He said, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat to see if our PM will actually answer a question this week. You and me both, Jonathan. Stuart, I'll get sacked for saying this, but if you unscrew the top, it'll cool down.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Let's get our first question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I asked the Prime Minister 6 questions last week, and he didn't answer a single one. He has a duty to this House, Mr. Speaker, to answer the question. Let's see if he can do better this week. I'll start with a simple one. Will the Prime Minister approve the licences for Rosebank and Jackdaw gas fields in the North Sea?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, under statute, that is a matter for the Secretary of State, as she knows, because it's the same arrangements that were in place under the last government. Licences were granted, they were then struck down because of the defects in the process of the last government. But, Mr. Speaker, oil and gas is coming out of the North Sea 24/7. It will be part of the energy mix for many years to come. We fully support all existing oil and gas fields throughout their lifespan, and in November we made changes to extend to allow neighbouring fields to be exploited. But we need to take control of our energy prices. The only way to do that is through renewables. The party opposite used to make that argument. One of their senior figures in 22 said this: it's investment in nuclear and renewables that will reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and keep our consumer costs down. Who was that senior figure? The leader of the opposition.
I mean, so she wants a yes/no answer, and the answer is it's not my job, because somebody else is going to do it. But Patrick, one can feel sort of currents and movements in politics in much the same way that for a long time the idea of a social media ban was just nonsense, talked about by cranks, and then all of a sudden in 1 week it all changed and it was definitely going to happen. I'm kind of feeling that about drilling in the North Sea.
Well, yeah, and actually if you were to ask Rachel Reeves that question, or somebody in the Treasury, they would give you a much quicker and much more straightforward answer than that if it was their decision. There is a bit of a sea change on this stuff, but nice, indeed. But you mentioned that the New Statesman piece by Will Lloyd, the long piece with Ed Miliband, and the sort of slight problem with Kemi Bay not going on this and Keir Starmer as a license on this very point is, it is not as if Ed Miliband's stance on this is a huge departure, particularly on oil and gas. Yes, there was the conditions against new licensing in Labour's manifesto, but it's not as if this is a huge departure from what Tory energy secretaries have been doing for the past decade. That's the sort of slight problem with this as a political attack. Is it changing? Yes, but right now Keir Starmer is behind Ed Miliband, and Ed Miliband is being Ed Miliband about it.
Stuart, I know you're not actually Ed Miliband, and I would not wish to accuse you of being so, but what is the logic?
Thank you very much.
What is the logic for if the plan is that we're going to transition to renewables as much as we can, but we're going to keep needing to use some gas? Why don't we just drill for some more gas?
Well, I mean, there is definitely a case for oil and gas based on the argument of having a mixture of the energy sources for national security reasons. But weirdly, using the energy crisis as a moment to resurface this bid for drill is weird, because oil and gas will not solve any immediate supply problems at home at all. If it's produced, it will be sold in the international market rather than at home. The most we'll get is extra tax revenue, and that's a very small amount. All the studies show it's a very small marginal amount. So this is not the solution to the crisis we're going on. So I'd actually quite like to see, from a Labour point of view, the Ed Miliband argument that he's trotted out for the last 5 years to be made by the Prime Minister and others, because this is the perfect moment to say, look, if anything secures the case for renewables as the foundation of energy security, it's the whole world being held hostage to a war in a 25-mile strait where all of our oil and gas comes out. And I think it's actually a good moment for the renewables argument to be front-footedly made.
Well, it's one of these times when everyone's saying the wrong things. So it's like, I think if we did drill for more gas in the North Sea, then we could reduce our LNG imports, which is about 10% of it or something like that. So it might make some small difference. But I think almost like weirder than the government not doing that is the opposition and I guess reform as well, banging on about energy security, which is important, without at any point acknowledging, as you say, that renewables are the answer to energy security.
The key to long term. It's tough to keep going with a long term solution when there's a short term crisis. Of course, that's right. But I think this is actually a good moment for the renewables argument to be made.
Let's get question 2.
This is not the day to be thrown out with a 2-week break coming. Kemi Bay.
Mr. Speaker, we can have renewables and oil and gas. He says it's a matter for the Secretary of State. He says it's a matter for the Secretary of State. I thought he was the Prime Minister, and he loves to hide behind legal process every single time. I wonder, Mr. Speaker, what a Director of Public... What? Have
Order. Mr. Yeltsin, you don't want to test my patience, I'm sure. Come back.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister loves to hide behind legal process. I wonder what a Director of Public Prosecutions would make of the defence. Sorry, I can't produce my WhatsApps. My phone's been stolen. The Jackdaw gas field could be up and running before winter. All that gas would be used here in the UK to heat 1.6 million homes. That is enough to power Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex put together. So will the Prime Minister approve the licences, or is the Energy Secretary running the government?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, legislation has been passed. It's absolutely clear that the quasi-judicial duty under the legislation rests with the Secretary of State. I really think if she's going to put this challenge to me, she needs to read the legislation. That is the legislation that they applied for 14 years. It's exactly the legislation that they used to put the licences in place, which were then struck down because the process was defective. But, Mr. Speaker, Let's be clear, when Russia invaded Ukraine, energy prices doubled. The 12-day war, oil prices hit £100 a barrel. In the last 4 weeks, because we're on the fossil fuel roller coaster, everybody has been held to ransom. The only way forward is to go further and faster on renewables. And the leader... Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition's approach is to outsource our foreign policy and let the US decide whether we go to war, to outsource our energy policy to Russia and Iran and let them set the price of energy. I will never do that because it's not in the British national interest.
Patrick, I put it to you, if you're under attack for always hiding behind legalese, it's a relatively bad idea to then begin your answer by saying
quasi-judicial.
Quasi-judicial duty under legislation belongs to. No?
Yeah, and look, it was... Keir Starmer is in his happy place there using words like quasi-judicial, isn't he? But, I mean, the sort of slight problem for Kemi Badenoch here is she is running up against a brick wall of process, and I don't think the political argument is necessarily strong enough that that Keir Starmer looks ridiculous in the responses he's giving. For all the reasons we've said, it's not as if, clearly it's a sort of more piquant, sort of more relevant discussion to be having, but it doesn't really seem that Keir Starmer looks particularly ridiculous right now.
No, I agree. I mean, when she said, she said the gas could be out of this field by winter and it would directly heat 1.6 billion homes. It's like, well, that might be true, but even if it did, it'd just be getting bought instead of other gas that's going to do the same thing at the same price. I mean, that was Keir Starmer, though, doing precisely what you were asking him to do.
Yeah, no, especially at the end when he's thinking, right, I want to get on to what I want to talk about, and off he goes with Kemi's, weakness on foreign policy narrative again. He did have a very good Ed Miliband line in that, the fossil fuel roller coaster. That is pure Ed Miliband, that kind of that line. I'm not sure it helps the Prime Minister particularly to point to his Energy Secretary and say he's in charge of this judicial process. I think that's a slightly odd thing to do personally. But no, I think you're totally right. I think he's on strong ground. I think it's the sort of thing that, 3 hours after PMQs, the Labour press team should put out some kind of, this is what Kemi Badenoch's arguing, this is actually how it works. The idea that we could immediately drill a new gas field, put it into every home in Britain at prices well below the escalating world market price of gas is complete nonsense. The whole thing is like shows she's not serious. At the moment, he's just sort of keeping her, forward defensive away. But actually, the argument itself, I think, is the sort of thing that Labour could really go to town with in the next day or so. Because it's a silly argument that she's making, I think.
I mean, net zero is not popular at the moment. When Keir Starmer delivers that kind of... And one doesn't often hear him... Maybe you'd agree, Patrick. One doesn't often hear him speaking with that much conviction that he's doing the right thing. When he makes that argument, is it because he, A, doesn't care that net zero isn't popular at the moment, B, just doesn't really think it's important, or C, hasn't sort of noticed?
I know. I think... I mean, look, this is not a critical remark. Keir Starmer is not the sort of politician who believes bunches of incredibly principled things, has core values that he will go to bat for above everything else, But one of them I do think actually is net zero. Yeah. I think he really, really thinks this is legacy stuff. He's talked before about his kids, I think, and how important it is to them. And I think in a politician who is fundamentally a technocratic improver of public life by hard work, that's his basic philosophy, I think one of the few things he has a principled view on is this. So, the political pressure on Ed Miliband in the last year and a half has been immense within the cabinet as well as from outside. Actually, the Prime Minister supporting the basic vision of what he's doing has been a really important part of them sticking with this, I think.
Yes, exactly. If the Prime Minister did not, to some extent, I'm not sure he has religion on this in the way that Ed Miliband does, and as much as Ed Miliband would probably like us to think that they are of one mind on it, the Prime Minister clearly agrees on it, because if he didn't, Ed Miliband would have been moved to another brief or sacked from the shadow cabinet long before the general election. It was interesting, Peter Hyman, occasionally a guest on your How to Win podcast, Hugo, used to work for Tony Blair and also worked for Keir Starmer in opposition, did a long piece on Substack the other day in which he recalled making Keir Starmer do an exercise where you sort of rank 9 issues in order of priority in a sort of diamond shape with the top priorities at the top. His top priority was inequality, but on the second row with 2 issues, climate was one of them. So it is clearly something he cares about. So it's not surprising we should hear him speak with conviction on this.
Let's get question 3.
Mr. Speaker, he is hiding behind so many people. He is the Prime Minister. He can make this decision today. He can. is so weak, he's the first person to be pushed around by the Energy Secretary. Let me remind him, Mr. Speaker, who is on my side. The unions, yes, GMB, they're on my side. Tony Blair. Mr. Speaker, Renewable UK, the very people that he's talking about, they are saying drill in the North Sea. Centrica, Octopus Energy, even Labour MPs. Let me quote the Labour member for Pembrokeshire who says, offshoring our carbon emissions might give a sense of moral superiority, but it is simply impoverishing our communities. We agree. So why does the Prime Minister think he knows better than everyone else?
I'm going to have one more go. The legislation, the statute, the law prescribes the decision maker. They know that. They should be embarrassed that she doesn't even... She's attacking me without having read the legislation. The legislation sets out who the decision maker is. It's the Secretary of State. It is not the Prime Minister. It has to be the Secretary of State, and it's a quasi-judicial process, exactly the process that they ran for many years. And, Mr. Speaker, oil and gas is part of the mix for many years to come, but we do need to get on to renewables. But, Mr. Speaker, we're discussing this because of the war. We need to de-escalate. And that is, yes, we are. That is why I stuck to my principles not to join the war and to act in collective self-defence. I appreciate the Leader of the Opposition doesn't get that. She wanted to jump into the war without regard to the consequences and then do a mother of all U-turns, and now she's stranded without a thought-through position. And, Mr. Speaker, when she was asked at the weekend whether she approved of the war, she said, that's a difficult one. It certainly is if you've got absolutely no judgment.
He's blown it, I think. I mean, because you can't keep saying that. You can't keep saying it's not up to me, it's up to Ed Miliband, because that's both saying I'm powerless here, and it's also saying, Stuart, Ed Miliband will do what he wants to do. I can't tell him what to do. It's like, why can't you tell him what to do?
Yeah, from my point of view, I guess the other problem with it is it's saying Ed Miliband will do the principled argument, I'll do the quasi-judicial argument, which is an odd division of Labour. You want the Prime Minister to make the principled argument, which makes me think there is some thinking going on about what they're going to do on this going on, and he's basically protecting.
Yeah.
I wonder whether, I'm just speculating, I don't know anything, but I wonder whether he's preserving the latitude to make some decisions, not necessarily about this, but in the whole energy mix issue over the next few weeks. Maybe that's what's going on. Or maybe he just thinks Ed Miliband will make the kind of tub-thumping case, and I'll do the, I'll just keep the walls at the door from the door by just going on judicial. But I agree, it's not the strongest way of protecting themselves.
Sounds awful weak, don't you think, Patrick?
Yes, but I do, as much as far be it from me to sympathise with Keir Starmer, I do agree with Stuart, basically, because clearly if you listen to what the Chancellor says about this, and has said about this for a long time, clearly she has a preference. Clearly Ed Miliband would have a preference. But the process of reconciling those two positions and making it look like it is compatible with the energy policy to which the government, even in this context, is still committed, is going to be politically tricky. And so the process is quite a good cover. And having this conversation with number 10 people about last week's PMQs, at which they just gave a series of holding lines over, 15 minutes, and it was excruciating for everyone, but they got out the other side, and the Prime Minister hadn't, blown himself up with another public admission of something very embarrassing. You wonder whether they're taking the same view on this. I mean, it's more assertive in the argument, the political argument he's making about the fossil fuel rollercoaster, etc. But often your strategy at PMQs is to sort of get through it without causing a disaster. Yeah, and I think he probably has got away with that.
So one of the people getting in touch on YouTube calls themselves the Tomorrow's Locksmith, says, surely we want a PM who pushes things through during a crisis, not referring to some legal framework. And I'm sure that is how a lot of people are going to be sounding. It's going to be sounding to a lot of people. Let's get our next question, question 4.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to let the Prime Minister in on a secret. He's the Prime Minister. He can change the legislation. Hiding behind the Energy Secretary is pathetic. Mr. Speaker, under his Labour government, we buy half the gas we use from Norway. Last year, Norway's Labour government drilled 49 wells in the North Sea. That's what Norway's Labour government did. How many did Britain drill? 0.
No.
For the first time since 1964, under his government, Britain drilled no wells. Why is energy security the right policy for Labour in Norway, but the wrong policy for Labour in Britain?
Mr. Speaker, so now our attack is if you changed and passed some different law, you could take the decision which he's challenged me today for not taking. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, all that would do is to slow the process down. Oil and gas is coming out every day. There's a mix of that and renewables. But it's really important, Mr. Speaker, the most important thing to get energy security is to ensure we de-escalate this war. I know where I stand on this. We are not joining the war. She wanted to join the war. She didn't think through the consequences, and now she doesn't know where she stands on the most important issue facing this country at this time.
Dear me. OK, Patrick, given that he's not saying we're not going to drill, he's just not wanting to talk about that right now, Kemi Badenoch is doing what Kemi Badenoch always does, which is trying to establish her own position in a thing that she thinks there's a decent chance will happen, so she can call it a victory once it does.
Yes.
Yeah?
I think that's quite clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think it's going to work?
Well, if you want to believe that the Labour Party, a Labour government would approve two oil and gas fields just because Kemi Badenoch told them yes. I mean, for pure political points scoring, good for the Tories, but I mean, to what extent do people notice or care?
I think it's interesting that the argument she's made in that question just now, the fourth question, is based exactly what Nigel Farage asked last week. Even the Norway analogy, if it's good enough for Norway, what's wrong with the UK? She did exactly the same framing of that, which is quite interesting. I quite like to see he won't do it, but I'd like to see the Prime Minister come back and say, look, everyone knows, all the experts know, in fact, not just experts, it's now become such a widespread discussion theme. We all know that Britain's energy problem, which is a big problem, is fundamentally that we are too tied to gas. Mm-hmm. We are over-dependent on the most expensive energy source. The idea that more gas is the solution to this is just nonsense. Now, that's a long-term argument, not a short-term argument, but I think, again, I'd like him to be more principled about the reason why the government's policy is as it is.
Isn't there something weird about the fact that this is even the battleground for the fight? Because as you say, it doesn't really improve our energy security whether we're drilling for more gas, up until the point at which people like Norway are saying you can't have ours because there's a global crunch, and yet everyone's sort of pretending that it does.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I mean, as we discussed at the start of these exchanges, who knows where we'll be in 6 months' time,
or 6 days' time?
In 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months. Let's not think about what the world looks like in 6 years. If we are in a real prolonged energy crisis, and it doesn't the sophistication of sort of this is how international energy markets work, etc., at that point maybe Keir Starmer being hauled over the coals for his commitment to an energy policy that is perceived not to take advantage of the bountiful lake of oil under the North Sea. Do these subtleties and sophisticated points matter at that point? But again, that's a sort of hypothetical argument we might be having if things are really bad in 6 months' time as opposed to now.
Isn't she also stirring up here because she knows that this issue divides the sort of green left of Labour from the right, the right wing of Labour? It divides Scotland from England. It divides the unions from the Ed Miliband part of the party. So this is, I think, a little bit of pot stirring on her part for short term, and perhaps with elections in mind, rather than just claiming a victory yet to come.
I'm just thinking, if you have a lake of oil, you presumably have a cloud of gas, but is it still a cloud of gas when it's underground? Discuss. Let's get our next question.
Mr. Speaker, the Norwegian Prime Minister is doing what is right for his country. If only our Prime Minister would do the same. Stopping all new drilling in the North Sea was a reckless promise when he made it before the election. In the middle of a global energy crisis, it is catastrophic. Experts are predicting a £300 rise in bills in July. Approving new licences would show he was serious about cutting bills. Why won't he do it?
Mr. Speaker, because of the action that we've taken, bills are coming down by up to £100, household bills, next month. Then they will be capped for 3 months. That's what we're doing to protect households across the country. And who voted against it? The Tories and reform, because they just don't get the impact on working people that we will protect.
Does anyone want to say anything about that, or should we just get the next one?
Just quickly. So what she's doing there, it seems to me, is she wants to get an argument in place for when bills go up down the line, and say she can't say it's because of some action they've taken here, there, or anywhere, because it's obviously a global phenomenon. But what she can say is different about Britain is we're not doing what she thinks we should be doing, which is drilling in the North Sea. Now that's a really ridiculous argument to prosecute, in my view. The idea that bills, if they do go up in September, go up because we didn't do drilling in April is nonsense. And hopefully Labour will, and lots of other people will make that case. But she's putting an argument in place, it seems to me, to justify wagging the finger at Labour if and when bills go up later in the year.
That's what I meant about the sort of unrealism of it all. That on paper it's nonsense, but it feels truthy.
Well,
you know
no,
what I mean?
exactly. These things become part of political folklore, don't they? Right? There was a good, presumably good reason for Gordon Brown to sell the gold reserves, but it doesn't stop people pointing at a graph of gold price and say, "Oh, that was the stupidest thing anyone had ever done at any point."
Well, it's something that Osborne did very well in 2008 when I was working for Gordon Brown, right? How do you nail Labour for being responsible for a global economic crash that began in the Midwest of the United States?
Yeah, sure.
And so you have to have your own British narrative about what this government's done that might, put the blame on them. And she's doing a smaller version of that here, I think.
Well, we've got one more question. Let's hear her ask the same one again.
Mr. Speaker, he says bills are coming down. They are higher than they were when he came into office. And he's talking about, what they're doing to help with energy bills. Families and businesses will suffer from the spike in energy costs because of his decisions. He could abolish the green taxes on their bills. He could stop the fuel duty rise. We could drill our own gas in the North Sea. What's he doing? He is planning another giveaway to people on welfare. Yet again, he's taking money from those who do work to give to those who don't. First, we had the budget for Benefit Street. Now it's the bailout for Benefit Street. Doesn't this just prove that they've given up being the Labour Party and they're now just the welfare party?
Mr. Speaker, the spike... they're the ones that double spend on welfare, Mr. Speaker. They're the ones with a broken system. And when we tried to mend it, what did they do? They voted against it.
Order. Mr. Dewhurst, you're tempting my patience. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, she talks about the spike in energy prices. That's because of the war, which I say we shouldn't join, and she says we should join without following through on the consequences. And time again, she gets the big calls absolutely wrong. She wanted to drag us into the war. She got that wrong. She opposed taking control of energy security, and she got that wrong. She opposed our decision to cut energy bills, and she got that wrong. And she seriously thinks that'll make her relevant, and she's got that wrong.
I've realised there's an involuntary noise I make into the microphone whenever someone starts a call and response. Why are they so bad at it? Why can't they just get it right? It's so easy to do.
Well, it wasn't immediately clear that was a call and response. And
I know.
It sort of seemed that a different cohort of Labour MPs joined in each time.
My favourite call and response is when the Prime Minister wants his backbenchers to go up or down, and you sometimes don't know, is that down or right? Is inflation?
Which is the good one?
Interest rates are up, down?
It's like when you have to say happy birthday to someone, but you're not quite sure what their name is, or whether you're calling them dad or what. Yeah, it's exactly that. Look, that question there from Kemi Badenoch, in the space of a single sentence, she says that they should stop the fuel duty rise, and she's also against the payout to benefit claimers over fuel duty. That's a Conservative leader being in favour of universal benefits and against targeted benefits.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's novel.
Isn't it? It is novel, and it leaves you. Not that Keir Starmer made this point, but sort of it would leave her vulnerable to a sort of a what you want, a Liz Truss style market busting. All-purpose, universal energy bailout. I have to say, I did think Keir Starmer's response, which was to sort of criticise increased welfare spending while not, he's sort of criticising the Tories for increasing welfare spending, but not pushing back on the idea that he was the welfare party. He's sort of slightly confused. It shows you the sort of bind Labour is in on welfare generally. But yeah, not a vintage exchange all round, really.
What do we think? Are there diminishing returns in his strategy of trying to remind everyone all the time that Kemi Badenoch had a marginally different position from him over the war for about a week once?
No, I think, although you put your fingernails on the blackboard when you listen to him doing it again and again, week after week, I actually think it's probably it's the right line to push. I mean, this is big stuff, and getting a call wrong on big peace and war issues is remembered and is about as fundamental as it gets.
Well, it's the first popular position he's held in ages.
Indeed. I think also, I actually think Kemi Badenoch before Christmas had a really good run of PMQs when she may well have even saved her job by being incredibly good at the dispatch box. She worked out how to pin the Prime Minister down on issues and made him look uncomfortable. Recently, I think she's actually got worse. And one of her problems is, and a lot of people do this in opposition, when they try and get too much in. That last question was an example. She ranged from energy prices to benefits, and she ended up with a sort of zinger line on welfare, which it's not quite clear where she was going with it. And I think sometimes you just need to be a little bit more disciplined.
I want to read it, but before we move on, I want to read out a message from Rob that he sent in. He said, Hugo, I lived in New Jersey when shale gas came online from the next day over in Pennsylvania. My gas bill halved. The idea that more gas doesn't decrease prices is ludicrous. That's Rob there. I mean, I guess it depends on the nature of the market. But yeah, surely if there's more gas sloshing around, if that's what gas does, then it is going to push down the gas bit of our energy costs a little bit. But that is only a small bit of our energy costs. Anyway, we'll be back in a moment with the best of the rest. This is Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio with Elevon, supporting all payments for your business. Make one decision today. Visit elevon.co.uk.
Times Radio. Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio.
Currently unpacking PMQs with Patrick Maguire and Stuart Wood, the Labour peer. Let's take a look now at some of the other exchanges at PMQs. Let's go first to the Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey. This is the second of his two questions.
Speaker, if Trump's war pushes up energy bills by £500, the Chancellor's very narrow plan simply won't cut it. And while I don't fall for the crocodile tears of the leader of the Conservatives, who cheered on this illegal war without a thought for the impact on people's energy bills, and the government is right to reject repeating Liz Truss's blanket cheque approach. But, Mr. Speaker, the government can't ignore the millions of families who don't get benefits, who already face a cost of living crisis. So can the Prime Minister at least guarantee to all those families and pensioners that he won't let their energy bills go up by £500 this year?
Let me say my verdict. He's right about the Leader of the Opposition wanting to join the war, and she's wrong about that. At least he's read the legislation that I'm being challenged on. It does help. It does help. At least he's right. It was the leader of their party that said, let's all go to war without thinking through the consequences. We're now discussing the consequences. Mr. Speaker, in relation to the support, we've made clear the principles, the approach we'll take. We'll keep this under careful review. Energy bills for households are frozen are capped until the end of June. It's really important I make clear that that's whatever happens in the conflict, because I know the public are concerned about that. We will then put in place appropriate support and look at how we put the principles behind it.
Lots of shouts there of stop sucking up while Ed Davey was asking his question. Stuart, what's coming from the Labour end, what's your understanding of the relationship between the Labour Party and the Lib Dems? Because I think a lot of people find it very confusing.
I mean, the Labour-Lib Dem relationship is complicated. It's at local level. It's always there are lots of areas where it's really not very good at all, where they're basically quite sharp enemies. Areas like Sheffield, there's all sorts of places where Libs and Labs, don't like each other at all. At national level, I mean, it depends who you ask. There are always bits of Labour cabinets that have better relationships with the Liberals.
Yeah.
And I suspect, I don't know, but Ed Davey, I mean, Patrick will know better. I suspect Ed Davey and Keir probably have a pretty decent relationship.
Yeah, and certainly in opposition they did. You've got to remember they're men of similar ages, both cared for unwell mothers as boys, broadly, similar politics. It's been, and that's made it quite striking in recent weeks, where Keir Starmer has lost his temper with Ed Davey a few times, particularly on this question of the Liberal Democrats being insufficiently serious about their approach to the conflict. But as you say, unless you are a councillor in Liverpool or Hull or Sheffield, outright hostility between the two parties does not serve you well.
He does speak to her with a lot more respect than he speaks to Kemi Badenoch. The whole kind of, at least he's read the legislation. I mean, he does...
to Ed Davey, you mean? Yes.
Yeah, speak to him, sorry. Yeah. I mean, and he may have grounds this week, but there is something about his tone towards her, that she is a silly little person bothering him who is not worthy of asking these questions, that I mean, it kind of wish he'd rein in a bit.
There is this sort of tectonic plate moving in British politics that I think most people think we're moving towards some kind of Conservative and Reform group on one side and Labour and the others on the other side. And of course, that doesn't mean that relations between those parties within those polls is good. But I suspect there's an eye on that as the changing shape of party competition knocking around.
OK, let's get one more question. This is from the leader of Reform UK, which is, of course, Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Smash the gangs. That is what the Prime Minister promised us. Trust me, I will stop the boats from coming. But 70,000 later, and 1,000 in the last week, and too many young men that pose a threat to national security, is it not time to admit Smash the Gangs has been a total abject failure, along, frankly, with most of his other policies? But isn't it now time, he told us, as summer approaches, what is Plan B?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, this is from the man in the party that voted against giving law enforcement counter-terrorism style powers to tackle them. So he wants the grievance, he doesn't want it sorted. And he has absolutely no judgment. He again said, let's join the war, let's all go to war. I want to make it perfectly clear he wants the war. A week later, screeching U-turn, we don't want to go to war. And he says, trust his judgment. Mr. Speaker, it's hard to take anything he says seriously. He promised lower tax, and now Reform councils are hiking council tax by 9%. In Worcestershire, this is what he said about Worcestershire. He said, we took control of a virtually bankrupt council. I wish we hadn't bothered. He asked for people's votes, and then he abandons them. Reform don't want to solve problems, they only want to exploit them. I am thankful for the opportunity to change this country for the better. He says he wish he hadn't bothered winning councils, because they're an absolute disgrace.
I should say, apparently after that question, Reform staged a walkout, and leading to Keir Starmer to refer to them later as the now departed Reform. Patrick, I'd almost forgotten about small boats. Nice they're going to be back for the summer.
Well, indeed,
Part of the season with Wimbledon and all that.
Well, yeah, and you wonder whether Reform's poll numbers are seasonal in that respect, because, the salience of immigration reduces over the winter, obviously, because the boats aren't coming in the numbers that they are. The economy has come to the fore, and Reform know they are weaker on that issue, hence their attempts to start talking about the cost of living. So, it's almost an expression of hope, that question from Nigel Farage, as much as anything else, isn't it? And I think the response, surely the longest we'll hear all afternoon from Keir Starmer, trying to do a tour de raison of everything he could possibly say about Reform. A classic of the genre.
Stuart, this is a government that has driven down immigration numbers, perhaps like in sheer numerical terms, perhaps like no government before. And yet they're still deeply, deeply, deeply vulnerable over the small bit of it that they obviously can't control because it's uncontrolled. Right. That must be immensely frustrating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the small boats issue has become much larger than any other immigration issue. And obviously Labour has got Shabana Mahmood, who's causing a lot of ructions from Labour's own benches. Yeah. Angela Rayner's remarks the other week when she made her speech at the mainstream reception, for example, where she singled out Shabana Mahmood's indefinite leave to remain policy as something she was uncomfortable with. But I suspect Keir thinks that he's got very tough policies on these issues from Shabana Mahmood, but ultimately the question is whether they reduce the numbers in the way that they are supposed to do, and that's going to be the key thing. I mean, Farage clearly knows. Farage's biggest weakness, it seems to me, is his association with Trump. And this is a moment at which the country is not a fan of Donald Trump, and they're seeing the effects of a Trump adventure on their security, their pockets and everything else. So I think Farage going back to immigration as his gold standard issue is no surprise at all today.
Look, before I let you both go, I think I want a verdict on what we think the score was this week. You can do it in football terms if you want. Patrick?
Well, Stuart and I are both Liverpool fans, so asking someone what the score was at the minute is quite traumatic. I'd say, God, I mean, is it possible to have an uninspiring sort of 4-2 to Keir Starmer? It's not a 6-goal
4-2 to Keir Starmer. Okay, interesting. Stuart?
I'd say it was low scoring on both sides.
Right.
I'd say 1-1.
1-1, really? So Patrick's giving Starmer the victory. You're saying it's more.
It
of a
was
draw.
okay. I thought. I mean, Keir Starmer's job is to bat off the attack, and I thought he did it okay, but in a way that was sort of slightly head scratching, perhaps at times.
Maybe like every week, the real winner was democracy.
Exactly.
Patrick Maguire, Stuart Wood, thank you very much indeed for being with me. What a pleasure. This is Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio with Elevon, the full solution payment service provider for your business. Find out more at elevon.co.uk.
Times Radio. Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio.
Okay, this is Hugo Rifkind here on Times Radio. It's just gone 1:15 and we have some really exciting news for you. This is an update on a story that has gone global.
A giant rodent is on the loose in southern England after escaping from a zoo one day after arriving.
That was CBS News reporting on Samba the capybara, who's been on the run for more than a week after escaping from Marlborough Zoo in Hampshire. Drone squads and humane traps have been deployed in the hunt, with zookeepers saying they're closing in on her location. Yesterday, the Times' capybara correspondent Will Humphreys spoke to us from the riverbank, also conveniently outside a pub. Well, he joins us again today. Hello, Will.
Hi there, Hugo.
I'm guessing here, but are you by any chance outside a pub?
I am not. I'm not today, no. I'm back in my home office, pulled off for other stories, but we have some exciting news in the hunt.
Well, yes, there's been a sighting, I hear.
There has, in the last hour, there's been a sighting. Samba is moving south and moving towards the actually built-up area of Eastleigh, which is probably not what the zookeepers want. They don't want her moving into sort of a built-up area where there's a lot more traffic, a lot more people. They did think they had her sort of cornered in a section of river, which they had sort of netted off, but she's clearly given them the slip and is moving south.
Obviously, nobody has yet had an interview with the rodent herself, but is it understood that Samba is aware of pursuit? Like, does Samba feel like she is running away, or is she just going about her business capybara style?
No, I think she's aware that she's being hunted down, really. There's been a few sightings in the last couple of days, some by the zoo staff themselves. They've seen her in sort of dense undergrowth and bushes that's hard to get to because it's around the river. But they've been unable to really get to her and do a sort of humane and safe rescue. So yeah, I think she knows that people are trying to capture her. perhaps that's why she's now moving south away from the river.
It's a fun and premature silly season story, but is there actually, I mean, among the sort of zoo types you were speaking to, is there genuine concern about the future of this capybara if she remains in the wild?
Well, the zoo is saying that the sister that was captured the day of the escape, Tango, is being checked on. She's fine, but they've said that these are social animals. They're used to being in large groups, up to sort of 10, 20 capybaras in a group. So they want to make sure that the capybaras are put back together. They're social. They need to have, other capybaras around them to exhibit their normal behaviours. So I don't think there's any doubt that the capybara could survive in the wild. There's plenty of grass, there's plenty of plants for them to eat, plenty of water around where she is. But socially, they want to get them back together.
And what can you tell us finally about the zoo's operation here? How much is it? I mean, it's drones, it's dogs. What is it?
Yeah, so there's drones, there's nets, there's humane traps. Sniffer dogs have been used to sort of narrow down the location. But there's also a degree of being out on the ground, and they're really reliant on members of the public chancing across Samba and letting them know. They want photos, videos, and exact locations to help them sort of follow the path and try and corner her, really, and make sure that they can get her back in the zoo.
Now, finally, are you hoping to get the first interview with her once she has been located and recaptured?
Well, Fee had the sound of a capybara played on the radio yesterday. I'm not sure what I could decipher from that, but we can give it our best shot.
There we go. Yeah, I don't even know how I'd write that down. Thank you very much indeed. That is the Times capybara correspondent, Will Humphreys. We'll hear more from him tomorrow, when presumably nothing else will really have happened either. Thank you, Will. Time now for the Departure Lounge, where we take a look at fascinating lives through the pages of the obituaries you can read in the Times every day. And I'm joined, as always, by Georgia Henich. Hello, Georgia.
Hello, Hugo.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Who have you got for us today?
So we have Theodore Pistek, who was a Czech costume designer. He made the costumes for the original 1984 Mozart Amadeus. He made these sort of incredible rococo kind of frills and wigs, and he actually he set off a kind of new romantic trend in the 80s for these kind of costumes. And he was working under sort of the communist regime originally when he became a costume designer, which was incredibly difficult. One of the reasons why he wanted to first become a painter and then a costume designer was because he wanted this creative expression in a time of repression. But it was really hard, especially with period dramas, sourcing things like buttons and kind of silks and brocades, and so he found it really difficult. And actually, one of the ways that he used to do it, he used to go to the shop that all of the wives of the communist members of the party used to shop at, and he would sort of wait until they'd finished and then go in and kind of sneak a couple of buttons in. And with Amadeus, it was his real breakthrough. So it won him an Oscar. And one of the reasons why Milos Forman chose him, he was also Czech. They had been friends since their days doing mandatory military service. Milos Forman had then moved to America, whilst Theodore stayed in Czechoslovakia.